Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO politics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Canadian political update. I'm giving you the breaking news. I'm sure you've already heard it. I'm also supporting some Canadian apparel in my standing with the Canadians, I guess, in their expression of their democratic right. Okay, so what's happened in the Canadian elections? Let's give you a bit of a background first to Canadian politics. I am no expert. Correct me if I'm wrong, Canadians, and people with far more knowledge about the Canadian political landscape. But my understanding is that Canada is broadly a centre-left country that has its left wing split and the right wing usually isn't. So you have a number of different parties. You have the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, and really they're your two main ones, especially for this election. In fact, you've had a coalescing around those two parties. And then you have the Bloc Québécois, so that they are interested more in the independence or the sovereignty or the identity of the French-speaking Quebec area of Canada. You got the NDP, they are progressive, more I think slightly to the left of the Liberals. You got the Green Party, they will be progressive as well. And then you got the People's Party that featured much more in the last election than they did in this election. So let's go back to 2021 to understand what happened then, to give that a foundation for what happened last night. So in 2021, you had a Liberal winning, the Liberals winning under Justin Trudeau 155 seats against the Conservatives 119. But because there's first past the post there, which, as you've heard me say before, is not a very good system for democratic representation, in my opinion. We have that in the UK. Many places that formerly in the British Empire have first past the post voting systems, have it in the United States, Canada, UK. Actually, Australia has changed now fully their system, and I think they have a much better system. But what that means is you can win the kind of you can lose a popular vote or get fewer votes than another party, but win more seats than them. There can be a disconnect between the amount of votes you get and the amount of parliamentarians you get. So in 2021, Justin Trudeau's Liberals got 157 seats with 33.1% of the vote. And the Conservatives got 121 seats, so 36 fewer seats, but with more of the vote, 34% of the vote. And of course, if you coalesce that vote in certain areas of the country, if that vote is denser in certain areas of the country, then you will win those seats overwhelmingly. But actually, the vote spread can, on a national level, not reflect the elected officials and the successes or failures of each individual party. Now, the Québécois Bloc Québécois party got 32 seats. So what you have seen, and by the way, NDP, the Progressives, last time got 25 seats, sorry. So with the Greens getting 2, what you saw this year is essentially the Conservatives and the Liberals doing better. Both parties did better. In fact, the Conservatives, although the Liberals won, the Conservatives gave them a good run for their money, and they took seats from particularly they took votes from the People's Party. So they ran at 1.62%. These are a populist right-wing party. 1.62% of the vote doesn't sound like a lot, but if you take I think they've got 0.7 at the moment of the vote this year, the People's Party. So if you take 0.9% of the vote and then add that on to the Conservatives, and then you get movement towards the Conservatives from actually younger people. So people who've been, I guess, living only through the last 2 elections will only know Liberal rule, and you might want to push back against that. So actually what you've got this year is an interesting demographic situation whereby older people are more likely to vote Liberal and younger people are more pluralistic, and they voted kind of all over the shop. You've then got the under Jagmeet Singh, the NDP, New Democratic Party, the progressives on the left fell apart, and they essentially gave a number of their seats really to the Liberals. Greens went from 2 seats to 1 seat. As it stands at the moment, it's not completely finalised, but the results at the moment are that the Liberals have 168, although some of those are where they're leading, but it looks like they're going to win. The Conservatives up to 144, so they've actually done, a lot better. But this shows that it is a centre-left country, really, because when Conservatives got in before, as far as I understand it, it's when the left gets split. And this is what happens in the UK. It's very similar to the UK. And in fact, the Conservative Party in Canada are called the Tories as well. So in the UK, before kind of Reform UKIP came along, the right was never split. So the Conservative was, if you sat on the right wing, you were going to vote Conservative. And so they managed to get 100% of the right wing vote, really. Okay, some minor fringe parties, but realistically, that was going to happen. But the left was split by Liberal Democrats, who are kind of centrist, centre-left, Labour, the big left-wing party, but then the Green Party as well. And then if you got to Scotland, the Scottish National Party, and then Plaid Cymru in Wales. And they would all split the left, centre-left vote share. And that allows, or did allow, the Conservatives to consistently have an advantage in the elections because no one was splitting their vote. That's broadly been the case in Canada as well, but the Liberals still have, I think, an advantage with the first past the post system. It favours them, and that there's still enough centre-left support for the Liberals such that they often get to win, and Conservatives really need that vote to be split. And then what happened this year is that vote went the other way, as in it became less split. So you had certain, so here you can see 23 in the Bloc Québécois so far, at least in 2025, whereas in 2021 they had 32. So they've lost, as it stands, 9 seats. And then you've got the NDP going from 24 seats now down to 7. So they've lost 17 seats. And you can see that most of those will have gone to the Liberals, but some to the Conservatives. Well, actually, the Conservatives will have got some of those. But then I also think the Conservatives, this is my speculation, will have got some of the younger vote as well, just general demographic shifts, perhaps. You've arguably moved away from this identitarian politics. And I think there's a slight rejection of that in this election, which is good news. So what the Conservatives were running on was kind of anti-woke initially, before Justin Trudeau stepped down. What happened was Justin Trudeau was very unpopular because he'd just been ruling for a long time and people are a bit bored of that, and he was seen as kind of too woke and stuff like that by some members of the electorate. And the polls were very much in favour of Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the Conservative Party, who was kind of MAGA-ish, right, and anti-woke. 2 things happened to shift the polls massively in favour of the Liberals so that they ended up winning. The first thing was that Justin Trudeau stepped down. So forget all the Donald Trump stuff. Justin Trudeau stepped down and Mark Carney stepped up. And Pierre Poilievre was much more popular than Justin Trudeau, but I don't think he was particularly popular objectively or across the electorate. It's just like, if you're going to choose between these two, I'm kind of a bit bored or annoyed with Justin Trudeau, so I'm going to vote Pierre Poilievre. But as soon as someone else comes along, and this someone else happened to be Mark Carney, who was a technocrat, a bureaucrat, like an expert in his field, but he's not some kind of massively, I mean, he's quite charismatic. I do like Mark Carney, but he's not going to set the world on fire in terms of barnstorming rhetoric or this or that, but he's just quietly competent, decent, moving away from, I don't know if you're bothered by things like woke, moving away from that. Is question on that quite a lot. Just going back to a bit of old school, sensible politics, right? And that was appealing compared to the Trudeau versus Poilievre. So the first thing is Trudeau stepped down, and you started seeing the Liberals come back up in the polls. And at sort of the same time, because this was happening while Trudeau was in, is you started getting Trump attacking Canada. And some people are saying Trump was the reason why the Liberals won, and could well be the case, at least largely the case. So not only Trudeau stepping down, Trump then starts saying that Canada will be the 51st state of America and attacking Canada and tariffs and everything. So you then get a rally round a flag effect. Now that rally round a flag effect is going to be more powerful for the government that's ruling at the time. Because it's like, hang on, they're attacking us, we're ruling. And so people coalesced around the Liberal government that was then being run by Mark Carney, not because he was elected by the electorate, but he had gone through an election process within the Liberal Party and beaten Chrystia Freeland. So he was the Prime Minister, and then he called a snap election so that he could get the popular mandate as well. Now, everyone in Canada, most everyone in Canada, Kevin O'Leary and certain people down on the news networks in the US are actually rather pro-Trump and fine with Canada becoming the 51st state. But generally speaking, most Canadians were up in arms about the rhetoric coming from south of the border. And that led to a growing support for the Liberals and a rejection of Pierre Poilievre, who had previously been quite MAGA-ish. And certain people like Danielle Smith, who is the leader of Alberta, if we go to look at the map of the voting, you can see right over here in Alberta covered in blue. So this is your real conservative heartland. That is Danielle Smith being the governor there and being completely MAGA, right? Still getting that support there. And in Saskatchewan as well, very similar. So the Conservatives recognise that they might have to pivot. And what you heard with people like Doug Ford and Poilievre as well, and actually eventually Danielle Smith, having to come out and really slam Trump for what he was saying, which was difficult for them because they were previously kind of pro-Trump, right? And I think that played okay for them. They've increased their seats, but I think it favoured the Liberals more than it did the Conservatives, and people were also possibly quite tactical, and that's why you've seen the NDP get absolutely hammered. They've lost a whole bunch of seats. They picked up a couple, here and there, but essentially they've lost some seats. Now, at the beginning of the night, the election was starting to look a bit worrying for the Liberals because there are a few ridings, as they're called, a few electoral districts over on the Atlantic coast here, on that eastern seaboard of Canada, that were not showing the vote shares that Liberals needed. In fact, they lost central Newfoundland and a few other places that were indicators that Poilievre could have a bit of a chance, and you started seeing Polymarket adapt to that. So the betting markets changed as the results started coming in, and you saw Poilievre going from a 10% chance of winning to a 50-50 at one stage. And it was like everyone was getting a little bit nervous, but then it all sort of righted itself as you got because the problem is some of these districts, these ridings, were low population ridings, and so they're more easy to skew. And also Newfoundland, which is where you had some of these slight upsets against what the initial polling had said. These were areas where actually Pierre Poilievre had gone and spent quite a lot of time campaigning. But when it came back to like more of your heartland places, your higher population places, then the Liberals came back into it. So the question then is, are the Liberals going to be able to form a majority government? It could be that they don't reach the 172 needed for a majority. Now, the previous 2021 government was a coalition, well, actually wasn't, sort of a coalition between the NDP and the Liberals. The reality is actually they had a, if we talk about it here, confidence and supply agreement. So yeah, March 2022, the Liberals struck a deal with the fourth place New Democratic Party, NDP, where the latter were provided confidence and supply for the duration of the parliament in exchange for certain policy concessions. So rather than a coalition where you have members of both parties being secretaries or ministers, I don't know what they call them in Canada, in these positions, and you work together as one, actually you start creating policies that appeal to the other party and confidence and supply. So if they're confident in that policy being aligned to them, they will supply the votes to get that across the line, right? So it's what happened with the Conservatives in the UK with the DUP in Northern Ireland when they didn't quite get enough votes and they had to go to 10 votes for Northern Ireland back in one of our, in the last 10 years or so. And they basically had to bribe the DUP with some money, basically some funding to Northern Ireland in order to get those votes. It wasn't a coalition, it was a confidence and supply. And that's what you had previously. And then with the essentially the capitulation or the evaporation of the vote for the NDP and to some degree the Greens, you had and actually interestingly for the Québécois, you had this growth in the seats for the Liberals, but actually much more for the Conservatives, interestingly. And we get to this point where the Liberals are looking like they've got 168 to 144, which gives, and here's the percentage share of the national vote. So the Liberals picked up more votes, but actually Conservatives picked up more seats relative to what they did have, if you see what I mean. So the 7.7% increase in vote for the Conservatives because of first past the post has led to them getting way more than than that amount of seats relative to the increase that the Liberals had. So the Liberals have a 10.9% increase in votes, and they've gone from 160 seats, to now up to 168. So they've only increased 8 seats. The Conservatives gone from 119 to 144. So they've got 25 seats extra. And yet the vote share increases do not correlate. So that's interesting. So the Greens losing out, the Bloc Québécois losing out, the People's Party absolutely losing out in the vote share, and the NDP big time. So you can imagine that the People's Party, those 4.2% of the votes will have gone to the Conservatives. The Green and Bloc Québécois and NDP would broadly have gone to the Liberals, but there will be some going to the Conservatives as well. And then changes in demographics as well will shift things around. So you might have had just people moving off the register, dying, and younger people coming through and voting, and then voting for the first time. They might think we've had Liberal government for this amount of time, etc., etc. So here we see the vote share and the seats share. So the Liberals have 43.5% of the votes, and now they have got back to having more votes than the Conservatives. That wasn't the case in 2021. And they have more seats as well. But as you can see, they've done better out of the seat share, out of first past the post. And in fact, the people who have done the worst out of first past the post are the NDP. So the NDP have 6.2% of the vote, 2% of the seats. Green Party, 1.2% of the vote, 0.3% of the seats. They've got 1 seat. People's Party, 0.7% of the vote. They get nothing to show for that. and independents 0.2, nothing to show. And this is a problem with first past the post, is that if you are, your votes effectively mean nothing if you live in a place where you like, this is the same for me here in my constituency in the UK. There's almost no point me going out and voting. And I'm so politically active that it's quite depressing. Like, my political choices in this constituency will never, ever, ever succeed. This is so blue in terms of conservative. Maybe reform conservative here, right? Absolutely 100%. There's not a chance in hell that this constituency is going to go Labour, Lib Dem, Green. It just won't happen. So that's why I've always argued for proportional representation. So even if my local guy doesn't get in, my vote goes towards something, or at least maybe preferential voting, ranked choice, something like that. It would be nice if my vote had more meaning. It's just kind of thrown away. It's never going to have any. I'm disenfranchised really by the voting system. But anyway, that's the same in Canada as well. And you can see that if you're NDP, you're going to be pretty annoyed that, hey, we've had 6.2% of the vote share and we've only got 2% of the seats around Canada. Here's the CBC News tracker, which at the moment shows only 155 elected, but has 13 leading. So if you put the leading with the elected, you get 168. Leading with the elected, 144. So these ones haven't been formally called yet, but it seems obvious to many that they're going to go that way, and that's why you see the results looking like they do in this particular chart. So yeah, that's the situation with the Canadian election. You have Mark Carney made a really good speech. I liked his speech that he gave afterwards, talking about unity, talking about build, baby, build. So expect to see building up of energy infrastructure, building up of housing, and then probably thinking in terms of economy and security, and doing trade deals with other people other than the United States, and then trying to sit down with the US and go, what the hell are you doing? Where do we go from here? But it will be interesting to see whether, it's looking like a minority government, but it might not be. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But I think the Liberals will be very happy with where they are, considering where they were earlier on in the year and last year when Justin Trudeau was tanking in the polls, and it was all looking pretty terrible. It's been an incredible rally for the Liberals, and this might go down as one of the most impressive turnarounds in political history, because the polls, that it's just the exact opposite happened. You had Poilievre up here, Trudeau down here, and then it went like this, and then so Trudeau was he resigned, and it started going like this, and then Carney took over, and they crossed over, and it went like that. You just get this big X as the Conservatives went down, the Liberals went up. But actually, that was relative to each other. But the Conservatives did fairly well. They improved their vote, in total numbers and seats. Pierre Poilievre might still be losing his own riding. So last time I looked, he was behind the Liberal is it Fanjoy? In Bruce Fanjoy, I think, in his riding. So it could be really, really interesting if the Conservatives do relatively well compared to the last election, but relatively poorly compared to the polling from 6 months ago, right? So it depends how you slice and dice it. But imagine you say, well done, Conservatives, you got more votes and more seats, but your leader has lost his seat. Ouch. That would hurt. But I'm not a big fan of Poilievre, but he was one of these kind of fairly populist, fairly social media savvy kind of guys who was doing more of a slick job of succeeding, as I say, before Trudeau resigned, and it all went tits up for him. And I think he's got Trump to thank for that, and that allowed Carney to shine, and it allowed his competence to become even more attractive to the electorate. As a former Bank of England governor, and I think the Bank of Canada previous to the Bank of England, he's got the kind of expertise, the chops to, I think, do the job that he now has in front of him. And I'm certainly pleased. I think it's going to be good for Ukraine, all things considered. Out of all the options, he was the best for Ukraine, I think. Chrystia Freeland, who was also running for leadership, she's got from Ukrainian background as well, and she might end up being a finance minister again. I don't know what part she'll play, but yeah, I think the Liberals are likely to do a better job in supporting Ukraine, but they probably need to ramp up some defence expenditure fairly quickly. That's enough from me. Hopefully that was of interest. That's just my waffling stream of consciousness. If I've got anything wrong, let me know. I'm no Canadian electoral expert, but that's my take. Take care.